Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 77th episode of the ReBT Advocates with me, Tommy Bateman, and Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com. Today, we had a really great email from a psychotherapist out of Long Island by the name of Sean Tendler. He is the founder of, I'm going to get it butchered if I don't read it, North Star Counseling Services, and that is in you can go to northstarlongisland.com, northstarlongisland.com to find his information. And we felt he asked such great questions. We're going to try to answer them all here, but it was worthwhile to really dig into them. He's an ReBT therapist as well, and great questions. So before we go forward, Michael, do you have anything to say first?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that the new revised expanded edition of 3-Minute Therapy is out. I wrote it with David Ramsey Steele, and I think you'll enjoy it. And you can get it by going to therebt.life, therebt.life. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you. All right. So our first questions. All right. So here we go. So Sean asks, first he compliments us, which I really appreciate because I take that right to heart and my self-esteem is directly tied to it. So after I've been properly pumped up, he asked a great question. In addition to the ABC model, what are some techniques and, quote, homework that clients or individuals can do to not awfulize as much, adopt more flexible attitudes, attain higher frustration tolerance, and develop more unconditional self, other, or life acceptance? As a primarily ReBT therapist, something I struggle with is advising clients on specific ways to help them really internalize their effective new philosophies, even after they intellectually see the logic or rationality of them. I like to use practices such as role-playing, rational emotive imagery, and shame-attacking exercises, but I find that clients often report that they get it, but don't especially feel much difference. There aren't too many resources pertaining to how to truly internalize and believe on a deep level the new health philosophy, even after fully grasping how the ABC model works intellectually. So he's saying his clients get it. Of course, there's no reason why I must have this or that, or life must be a certain way. But it's not really part of who I am, and I'm still having those psychopathological emotional outbursts. Michael, what's your response to that?
Yeah. Before I respond, I just want to mention, especially for the new viewers, that Tommy was just joking about raising his self-esteem. We have a very good episode on abolishing the whole self-esteem concept. We're against it and in favor of unconditional self-acceptance. I think, Sean, what you're dealing with is the level 1 versus level 2 problem. The level 1 is when people superficially recognize that their musts are false, there are no good or bad people, life is never horrible, awful, or terrible, just very bad at times. So people recognize that that's true. But then level 2 is where they deeply feel it, believe it, and act on it. And that sounds like what some of your clients are missing. So your question is, how do you get them from level 1 to level 2? And the general answer is practice, repetition, review, going over the irrational ideas, disputing them, questioning, challenging them again and again and again. And one very effective way to do that is have them write out 3-minute exercises on a regular basis. Now, when some of my clients report what your client has reported, I say, well, if you write it out once a day, do it twice a day. And if twice a day isn't enough, do it 3 times a day. I had one client that comes to mind who is deeply depressed. He was a great musician, but just dropped out. And when he started doing the 3-minute exercises, he found that if he did 2 a day, it kept his depression at bay. But when he started just doing 1 a day, it started to come back. So that's one avenue to helping people internalize these ideas more. Tommy, did you have a suggestion?
Well, oftentimes it's hard for me to believe something until I, actually experience something that radically alters my worldview. Maybe we can do it in smaller steps. So I'm trying to come up with a specific example, but often what I recommend is, okay, maybe you don't feel it right away and don't internalize it right away. That's fine, but let's just be very aware of the opportunities to have this new thinking, this new unconditional life, other self-acceptance. And so when you're at a moment of decision and you can think your old way and behave, and I'm just talking not even emotionally, just outwardly behave as if that thing is true, that your old belief is true, or you can act the new way and just act it. Don't have to emotionally react to it, but just still act and behave the way as if you believe the new thing. I tend to see the results for me where, oh, well, I kind of went through the motions. And when I saw that the results were completely different behaviorally and the reactions from other people were different and my life was actually physically different from it, then I started really believing it. For example, here's one. Your wife yells at you, right? Typically, you think that woman should not be yelling at me. I have done nothing wrong. I'm a great person, yada, yada. Now, let's say you still believe that, right? You still believe that. But in your moment of clarity, you go, all right, I'm just not going to react to it. I'm going to pretend that I really don't think those awful, mean things, whatever they may be, right? Or untrue things is what I should say, and behave that way. Usually I found kind of in a reverse way of people finding out that what they believe is the new unconditional life, other, and self-acceptance is actually true or works better, at least practically speaking.
Okay, very good. And there is a famous quote to reinforce what you said, Tommy, and that is the French writer Stendhal. That was his pen name that he went by, Stendhal, who lived and wrote around the turn of the century between the late 1700s and early 1800s, said, if you want to fall in love with someone, act as if you're in love. So that's right in line with what you're saying, Tommy.
Wonderful. And Stendhal was his pen name, but his actual real name, if just kind of a fun fact, is Albert Elie. But go on, Michael.
Very good. It's often said that if you want, a good way to learn something is to teach it to others. So I recommend to my clients that they discuss some of these ideas with others, get others' reactions, especially their criticism, so they can go deeper and try to respond to those criticisms. And if not, make a note of the criticisms and ask me, and I can help them understand it better. Or actually teach it. You could say, I'd like to teach you a very powerful idea called unconditional self-acceptance or high frustration tolerance. And finally, help others. So you can enlist a friend or relative who has some problem. Say, would you like some free ReBT therapy? And try to help them. And that'll help you internalize it also.
All right. So I think we wrapped that question up. Am I safe to go to number 2?
Well, actually, I have a few more suggestions. Another one is behavioral. Now, you had mentioned, Sean, shame attacking exercises. So that's one behavioral approach where you purposely do something shameful out in public, like you go for a walk on a very sunny day with an umbrella and galoshes. And then you show yourself that if people think I'm an idiot, that's their thoughts in their head, and I can allow them to think that. And I'm still me, the same person, acting silly, but that's not my entire essence. So, and also risk discomfort. If your problem is low discomfort tolerance, you avoid doing uncomfortable things, facing the music, then purposely find out and seek out uncomfortable things to practice high frustration tolerance, to show yourself that you can survive discomfort. It's not going to kill you. I had a notable client who did this in spades. He poured a bucket of cold water over his head every morning to help raise his frustration tolerance. Also, risk rejection. So ask someone out for a date who you've been avoiding or who you've been afraid to ask, or go for a job interview for a job that you think you may not be qualified for, and show yourself you can survive rejection. Another approach to help people internalize these ideas is bibliotherapy. Albert Ellis wrote over 80 books on the subject. So the more you read, the deeper your understanding gets of these ideas. And as your understanding gets deeper, you internalize them more and go on to level 2 learning. Another approach is listen, write out 3-minute exercises, record them on your phone, especially the E section, effective new thinking, effective new philosophy, and listen to it while you're driving, while you're walking down the street, while you're standing online at the supermarket. Listen to it over and over again. Remember, we're going for reinforcement, practice, repetition. So these are all ways to accomplish that.
Yeah, I had a client that listened to Albert Ellis lectures and Albert Ellis's therapy sessions on YouTube. He did that quite often. I don't know if it's in podcast form where you can download it, but he found them on YouTube. Also, a really great YouTube channel to just reinforce ReBT thinking is this thing called the ReBT Advocates. Just a thought.
Yeah, very good, very good. Shall we go on to the next?
Absolutely. So, number 2 of Sean's Tendler's up in Long Island of NorthstarLongIsland.com asked a wonderful question. How does ReBT deal with recent grief or trauma? I feel like sometimes when a client just lost someone, especially a parent, spouse, child, or etc., or experience a horrific traumatic event, going through the ABCs with them doesn't come off as, going through the ABCs with them could come off as a little insensitive. Obviously, I wouldn't go right into how they're irrational for believing that their blank shouldn't have died or how their trauma shouldn't have happened within the first 10 minutes or so of the session. But I think that, at least for me, I have trouble utilizing ReBT with these two topics. So I'd be curious to hear what y'all think about them. Now, that's a biggie. So go for it, Michael.
Okay, well, I've dealt in my many years of doing therapy. I've helped many people in these situations, and there are a variety of ways to do this, which we'll discuss. I just wanted to mention the phrase traumatic event. Now, there is no such thing as a traumatic event. Sorry to deliver that news, but there are just events, and then you upset yourself about the event to a great extent, and you create the trauma in your head. But events are just events. They're neither good nor bad, but as Shakespeare said in Hamlet, it's thinking that makes it so. So I'm not suggesting that you immediately tell a person who's been robbed at gunpoint there's no such thing as traumatic events, but I think that's a high-level way to view it.
And moreover, let me interrupt, and that doesn't change the fact that after the person interprets an event as highly horrific or traumatic, that it doesn't encode in your brain a certain way, and that you don't have those physiological changes related to what we call traumatic events. We're not saying that doesn't happen. We're just saying that our reaction is what determines how those physiological things get encoded in our brain. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, good point, Tommy. And I'd go further than that. I'd say any event that occurs, good, bad, or even indifferent, if we perceive it, then in some way it does get encoded in our brain. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean we're scarred for life or it stays there forever.
Yeah.
But whenever we experience something, there's an interaction with our brain. Now, to get onto the emotional disturbance about these things, I would like to, if this makes sense to you, Tommy, I'd like to continue at this point next time because we're just about out of time. And I think we dealt with Sean's first question very thoroughly. So, by the way, Sean had 2 more questions, one about grief and traumatic events, and the other one was related to what if your client understands ReBT perfectly, has internalized it, yet they're still depressed, they're still anxious. Yeah. So we'll address that in a coming episode.
Yeah, that was I like how we thoroughly did the first one, and then we kind of said something pretty juicy in that second one about traumatic events. Now, we didn't really get to grief, but I'll leave you on this note, guys. if we did an ABC with grief, such as A, my father died. B, your belief about it is, I wish my father were here. I love him. C, consequence, you're sad. Would I REBT that? No. Is there anything irrational in thinking, I wish my father were here and I love him very much? No, that's a normal reaction. I don't call that psychopathological at all. So maybe we don't need necessarily counseling there, but we need time. Maybe that's a sneak peek at the next week. Michael, do you have anything final to say?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what you said, that grieving, mourning, crying about a loss is reasonable. And as Tommy is highlighting, comes from preferences. We don't want to cure anyone of that. So we'll cure that. We'll cure you all of getting disturbed, anxious, guilty about these events next time. Okay, thanks again, Sean, for sending in those questions. If you have questions that you'd like us to discuss, please either email us or write a comment underneath this video. And also, if you like the video, please comment, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to the ReBT Advocates to stay on the rational side of life.